Conspiracies. Once thought to be the works of mentally challenged broadcasters,
I'm kind of retarded.
crazies, Bigfoot admirers. The term is now broadened to anyone who questions government and/or corporate propaganda. However, I want to change that and bring back conspiracies to the gold standard. The real joy of conspiracies is that there is typically a mixture of truth and pure PCP-induced schizophrenia mixed together, which makes up the proprietary blend of most conspiracy lovers. The trail mix of mental stimulation creates a blend of sweet and salty that keeps you coming back for more. For example, conspiracies like birds not being real, Bigfoot, or traps not being gay are sweet because they are so outlandish and silly that one feels more grounded in reality and safety when hearing them. They are nothing but campfire ghost stories. However, when we dig our fingers into the bag and place the next piece into our mouth, we are greeted with existential horrors and possibilities that alter our understanding of the self and surrounding world. Things that make us question everything we know and take us down a path of no return. Today we will delve into the mysteries of UFOs and their relation to the N-word. No, God, no. I didn't mean it like that. I didn't mean that N-word. You know the funny helmet guys? The ones with the not-so-fun camp guys? The being a zombie in every damn zombie game guys? You know what I mean. I don't know if I can say the word because YouTube might flag my videos. I'm not trying to get demonetized, you know? How else do you think I can afford all these bandages? I mean, even with my Costco membership and buying the biggest amount they sell, I drop at least $200 a month on bandages. Don't even get me started on the tinfoil. Especially around 4th of July, the prices just shoot up because everyone...
Come, Nerevar. I will spare you from Joshua's spectrum disorder. He was talking about Noirs, wasn't he? I told him that it's not the first era anymore. It's not okay to say that word now. You have to say words like foreigner or invader. You can't just say it out loud or you'll end up on Twitter. Wait, what? Oh, you mean those guys? Right. The guys who followed the little mustache man. Did you know his real last name was Schickelgruber? Doesn't sound very ubermensch to me. And what's this about UFOs and Antarctica? I think Joshua is getting a contact high from smelling all the gun oil on those pistols he's always cleaning. Can I also add that Joshua and his little new Canaan cult is another Waco waiting to happen? I mean, he's a Mormon. A Mormon, for Christ's sake. I wouldn't trust those people with my dog.
And so I asked the lady, "What do you mean you have to wear shoes in here? I just want to buy this iguana." Hey, are you listening? Never mind. Let's get back to business. I first want to lay down the foundation for why Antarctica is so important, and why it is relevant to the topic of UFOs and to the Germans in World War II. When we think of Antarctica, we typically think of what? Penguins, ice, those adorable Coca-Cola bears. I doubt you think of an untouched continent free of disease and rust, with pockets of green and brown oasis amidst the icy tundra. I doubt you think of massive under-ice caverns capable of supporting life, with warm lakes and lush green ecosystems. If this picture I'm painting is true, and there is evidence pointing to such, it would make the idea of Antarctica being off-limits without strict permits due to being inhabitable less likely. But perhaps it gives some credence to the idea of keeping people out due to protecting domestic flora and fauna, which, you know, our governments care so much about. Not to mention the possibility of large oil deposits and uranium deposits in the South Pole. I'm surprised the US hasn't taken one out of Australia's book and invaded the native avian population in the name of democracy. Many people don't know, but Antarctica has hundreds of lakes, many of which are subglacial, meaning below the ice, up to 2 miles in some places. There are small regions of Antarctica that have warm enough lakes to swim and fish in. Some of these lakes have been isolated for millions of years, with no access to sunlight, such as Lake Vostok. What's more fascinating is some of the subglacial lakes are teeming with life, which is due to volcanic vents around the lake that eject minerals. These help sustain life, such as plankton and bacteria. This in turn provides food to fish and oxygen-producing organisms. With food and oxygen being present, the idea of humans being able to live around or near these lakes seem more plausible. But why would anyone want to inhabit such a place? Why even bother? Well, there are many reasons, some more reasonable than others. Natural resources? Sure. A good spot for potential travel routes? Sure. A good spot militarily?
Seaweed seed bun.
Yes. Yes!
And why was the Antarctic Treaty signed? 29 countries at the time this video was made signed the treaty. Countries like China, India, the United States, Russian Federation, Ukraine, and so on, all agree that existing territorial sovereignty claims are set aside, that territorial claims are not recognized, disputed, or established by the treaty, that no new territorial claims can be made whilst the treaty is in force, and that nuclear explosions and radioactive waste disposal are prohibited in Antarctica. Now, I'm curious as to why so many countries who clearly have beef and have had beef for decades would come together and say, look guys, I know this place is militarily a great location and that it's potentially resource-rich. I also know that a number of the countries here love taking land. But guys, think about the penguins. Do you really expect me to believe that a country like China, who treats both its people and the environment like trash, to care about keeping a landmass pristine? Do you think that the superpowers would give up a strategic landmass because of environmentalism? Why does the United States government flood so much money into Antarctica? If you think our governments really care about you, your movement, or your people, well then I have beachfront property to sell you in Nevada. What if I told you before this treaty was drawn up, and before WW2, Germany was already staking out Antarctica with rigorous intent? Alfred Richer led an expeditionary force in 1937 and 1938, which landed them in Queen Maud Land and established bases there. They took over 11,000 photographs for map purposes and had a swastika flag dropped every 20 kilometers to substantiate the German claims that they had landed in Antarctica. It is said that they found warm lakes and ice-free areas. Credence is added to these claims of German Antarctic bases via the remarks of Mr. von Ribbentrop, who served as Minister of Foreign Affairs during the time, which he says, and I quote, "In accordance with Germany's long-range political strategy, we have taken into firm possession the Antarctic area called New Swabia, and it will be and ensure a safe retreat in case of necessity." End quote. This begs the question if Mr. Mustache himself escaped to one of these said bases, much like how many Germans escaped to Argentina. I must say many Argentinians look rather light-skinned. It's also curious how close Argentina is to Antarctica.
That's quite big. Impressive. Ooh, that's kind of small. Yikes.
So clearly Mr. Mustache and the rest of his merry elves thought it was a good place to settle for one reason or another. Perhaps the idea of an oasis in a desert of snow is an odd one, considering the location of the South Pole. But even on one of National Geographic's old maps, it claims that one of Admiral Byrd's most surprising discoveries was a so-called oasis. It was found that the German submarines repeatedly followed the Antarctic route. Could they perhaps be going to a base location? Once again, not only are there potentially habitable areas on the surface of Antarctica, but below the ice there are huge underground lakes. The warmer water of some of these lakes, mostly due to the heat from volcanic vents, allows ice tunnels and domes to form, which is the perfect location for a hidden base. From the ocean's edge, a submarine could easily pass under the coastal ice and into these tunnels. These areas would be immune from storms and polar cold, hidden from outsiders and out of enemy reach. After World War II, the Americans recruited German scientists to work in the United States, termed as Operation Paperclip, which we will touch more on later. But the real surprise was how many highly qualified German specialists were missing, and also hundreds of submarines. Most speculate they went to Argentina. I wonder why. Shortly after the end of World War II, the United States and a few other Allied countries sent down an armada to Antarctica, consisting of submarines, destroyers, support vessels, marines, and 4,500 armed troops led by Admiral Byrd to Neuschwabenland in Antarctica. Neuschwabenland is the name of the Arctic territory annexed by the Nationalist Socialist Germany in the 1930s. When the Soviet Union fell, Maps were leaked which supposedly showed how to navigate the ice to find the underwater German bases, as well as subterranean habitable land masses, which the Germans referred to as Asgard. As silly as this sounds, the events that transpired during and after Byrd's expedition make this claim seem more on the salty side of conspiracy theories. So, to make this as non-boring and comprehensive as possible, we have Admiral Byrd, who was an American naval officer. Byrd was tasked with leading an expedition to Antarctica, which was coined Operation High Jump, under the pretense of conducting scientific studies. But that's a little weird considering, the battleships, armed men, and attack planes that rolled with Byrd down there for science. Well, when Admiral Byrd landed conveniently in the same land Germany had claimed before WW2, they set up some bases, had some snowball fights or whatever, and they started scoping the landscape. Well, Byrd and some of his other pilots began having very weird instrument malfunctions, and planes just started crashing, disappearing, and other weird sorts of things. Supposedly, one plane even disintegrated as though it hit an invisible wall. Fair to say that Byrd was freaked out and got the hell out of there. A planned 6-month expedition was terminated in only 2, in total losing a destroyer, almost half their carrier-based aircraft, and dozens of sailors and officers. Byrd and company made a stop along the way back home in San Diego, Chile on March 1947. During this stop, Byrd was interviewed via a press conference and had some interesting things to say. He claimed that World War III would be set off in the Antarctic region, also saying that it would be with an adversary that could fly unobstructed pole to pole. Some people will argue that he never mentioned flying pole to pole, but supposedly news clippings of the interview at the time refute this rebuttal. Many of these events were written about in books, newspaper clippings, referenced on old maps, and so on. However, with the amount of current censorship, which hides behind the guise of societal well-being and truth, many sources once freely available are now much more occulted and hard to find. I swear if I see another fact-checked website pop up when I search something somewhat controversial, I'm going to rinse my mouth out with buckshot. Regardless, the info is out there, if you are hungry enough for it. Well, if none of this seems weird yet, then perhaps the events that happened to Secretary of Defense James Forrestal after speaking to Byrd will pique your curiosity. The first person Byrd spoke to was Forrestal, and later Byrd's journal was confiscated. Well, it was a diary, but I will spare Byrd the embarrassment. Anyways, the record of what Byrd saw as well as his journal are locked up and considered top secret. Nothing to see, folks. Well, I guess Forrestal, like many under the watch of the deep state, said, maybe I'm gonna just talk about this to people. What could go wrong? And like many, he ended up dead. By their own hand, of course. Kind of like Gary Webb, who was exposing the FBI's connection to the crack cocaine epidemic. Gary supposedly ended his own life by shooting himself in the head twice with a .38 caliber bullet and strangled himself. I mean, it's not like crack cocaine had any target demographic, right? And of course there was no intention to degrade a group of people's culture and turn them into a permanent underclass, right? The government would never do that, right? Oh well. Anyways, Forrestal got to talking and he was soon hospitalized. He apparently also had some illness or another, but it wasn't specified. Supposedly, when Forrestal was in his hospital room, he began talking to the staff about Operation High Jump, telling them about UFOs and a subterranean German city. Shortly after, he was denied visitors, including his wife. Supposedly, he was visited by men and questioned. He later jumped out of the 16th-story window to his death at Bethesda Hospital. Kind of weird, too, how Admiral Byrd's son also died in mysterious circumstances at the age of 68, covered in dirt and left to rot in an abandoned warehouse. They claim Alzheimer's, which it very well could have been, but it must have been a very aggressive case at that age. I wonder if he, too, in his older age, thought about telling others what his father surely told him, beaten and bruised in a warehouse left to rot. Maybe he just owned a loan shark some money. Regardless of conjecture and guesses, what we are provided with begs the question, why cover it up if it is real?